Is Paul Ryan's approach dead on arrival? Is it the wrong argument to be having?
Well, I think he's wrong to say no matter what happens and no matter what the circumstances are, we won't touch taxes. I've already said, I wouldn't be against lowering the corporate rate as long as you didn't lose money by making sure everybody paid something. But Ryan's position is whatever tax rates exist now are perfect as compared with anybody paying $1 more. The only way to make the tax system more perfect is to have it produce less revenue. And I think that's wrong. But I don't think the Democrats can say the same thing about Medicare, Social Security, or anything else. The other thing is, I just think his Medicare proposal is on the merits wrong. That is, there is no reason to believe that if you cut a check to all the people on Medicare, that all of a sudden they'll have market power and they'll drive down Medicare costs and they'll be better off. What in all probability will happen, particularly if they dismantle some of these other cost controls, is that medical costs will continue to go up and older people will use less, get sicker, and die quicker, or they will be poorer because they'll have to spend so much of their money on health care. In other words, the problem is rising medical costs. Medicare is a part of a whole health care system that has a toxic rate of inflation and a spending base today that's not sustainable. It's also one of the major reasons people don't get pay raises. Employers that try to provide health care to their people find in a down economy that it takes whatever increased revenues they allocate to labor just to pay for the health care premiums, and they got nothing left to give pay raises. So I applaud Congressman Ryan for making a suggestion, but I think on the merits it doesn't work. And that's really what I hope the lesson that we'll draw from the New York election, not that we can't talk about Medicare and we have to tippy-toe around, because we have got to have a system that brings health costs in line with our competitors. And we do have to go back to your popular opinion question, we got to have a much deeper commitment than we've had to making sure Americans understand the American healthcare system as compared with others. Americans are so historically averse to caring about or absorbing what our competitors are doing in some areas. We've got to know what our competitors are doing in every area, and it has to matter to us.
You said a moment ago, and I know you didn't mean it quite this flippantly, but to heck with the election next year, but we're in Washington. You follow politics. Is there any stomach for actually grappling with these issues with an election year looming, not only for the president, obviously, but also for Congress?
If they could reach a bipartisan agreement,
big if,
even if people disagree with the particulars. You got a mini example of that at the end of the year when the president and Congress made an agreement on the tax thing. And I didn't agree with all of it, but I thought he should take it because it was the best deal he could get, and I thought the Republicans should take it from their point of view as the best deal they could get. The American people supported it overwhelmingly, even though there were things almost every American didn't like about it. There is a real hunger for us to do things, so I think a lot of these polls will shift if they reach an agreement. And I wouldn't put it past the president and the Congress to be able to reach an agreement next year because it's an election year and because the Republicans now have the majority in Congress and they want to hold it.
How do you know there's a hunger to do something big? I mean, you talk to people all the time. You travel the country, the world. Where do you get that from?
I'm not sure there's a hunger to do something big. I said there's a hunger to make an agreement. But I think that we haven't done enough, any of us, to educate the American people. That's why I like that's what we're doing today. That's what the main benefit of all this is, to register in people's psyche that this is a huge problem. We'll never, because none of us have a vote in Congress. I think Mr. Ryan's coming up later, but otherwise, unless you're in Congress, you don't have a vote. Unless you work in the White House, you don't have, or the Treasury Department, you may not have an impact. But I think that the American people want us to work together to meet the big problems of the country. If the only problem we have now is that we're not a young country anymore. We're actually the oldest democracy in history now. And every society that achieves enormous success at some time reaches a point where they have to reform or suffer the consequences of decline because the institutions no longer serve the purpose for which they were established as much as they preserve the positions of the leaders and the constituents of the institutions. People get more interested in holding on to the present than creating the future. There's some of that in America now. And we have to create an appetite for the future again by showing people both the negative consequences of not doing it and also the positive consequences of doing it. The purpose of this is showing the negative consequences of not dealing with the debt. We also need a prettier picture about the positive consequences of creating the future, which requires us to deal with the debt.
My next question is about where you see the political consensus, but I want to put it in the words of Jim Dickey, who's one of our members of the public who wrote in from Boulder, Colorado. He asked, what is the likelihood that incumbents in the House and Senate will vote for any kind of debt compromise or budget bill versus holding their party's line in order to get reelected?
Well, I think the likelihood is greater that the Democrats will do it and that the Republicans in moderate districts will do it. If there are any changes in revenues, which can be tagged as revenue increases, then in those districts where the Tea Party can control the primary, or if you've got a situation like the situation which cost Senator Bennett his job in Utah because he dared to have a conversation with Ron Wyden about health care reform. In other words, a caucus situation, it's a problem. And so I think it's different from district to district, different from state to state. But there may be enough votes for a bipartisan consensus. I think it's going to be ironically easier to get the Democrats to vote for a bipartisan consensus than Republicans if they come from districts where the anti-tax theology school can declare them heretics and banish them to electoral hell.
So you think Democrats are in a better position? Why would you think that? I can't imagine. Why you think the Democrats are in a better position to agree to consensus than Republicans are?
Because we proved that we will do things that are controversial, and a lot of us gave. The only thing that I think is working on the Democrats now in terms of taking on any controversial decisions is how many of them got beat in the last election for doing the right thing on health care and the stimulus. But that's partly our fault because we, like I said, didn't have a national campaign. For the first time since 1998, we ran a midterm election without a national message at a time when we needed it more than at any time since 1994, and because we didn't have it, we got the same result we got in 94. But I still think Democrats will vote for a combination of spending cuts and revenue increases, either from eliminating tax expenditures or from changing rate structures. They're just more willing to do it. And I think the Democrats would vote for some changes in Medicare, but they would want to believe that they would actually work to stabilize health care costs and not just make the elderly poorer and more at risk.
What should the national message be? Should it be this? Should it be something else? Larger, bigger, smaller?
No, well, first of all, I think dealing with the debt is a precondition of creating the future. In an interdependent world where the people that are buying your debt are the same people that are selling you products with undervalued currencies, you can't be in a position where you can't enforce your trade laws. I supported 300 trade agreements, the World Trade Organization, and putting China in it. But we enforced our trade agreements. The World Trade Organization, contrary to a lot of people's assumption, does not require unilateral disarmament by America. It presumes mutually beneficial trade relations. And you have to negotiate those and fight them through and work through the details and assess things like the relative currency values if you want to have a balanced economy with a manufacturing sector and not be totally dependent on finance and consumer spending and housing. And so, my view is that we should say that's a part of it, but it's not the only part of it. As I said, we'll be able to sell this debt reduction thing a lot better and bringing the deficit back toward balance if we also have a positive picture of the America we're trying to create, the kinds of jobs we're trying to create, the opportunities we're trying to create. We have a lot of other issues here. You know, college graduates are having trouble finding jobs now. We dropped from 1st to 12th in the world for the first time since World War II in the percentage of young adults with 4-year college degrees in this decade. We are still first in the percentage of young people going to college, but we dropped to 12th in degrees. We've got a lot of things that we can do that ordinary people will understand more than the details of CBO scoring are the 7 things you have to do if you want to get healthcare costs under control. And so I think that the political strategy here should not be to run away from this, but to marry this to a positive program to put America back to work and a picture of what it'll look like if we go through the changes. If the public won't buy it, then we're stuck with what we are, but I don't think we should give them a chance before we give up the ghost. They haven't had a fair chance to evaluate a real balanced plan to create a different future yet.